Broadcasting from Boston, Massachusetts, the Smart Cities podcast is the only podcast dedicated to all things smart cities. The podcast is the creation of ARC Advisory Group's Smart City practice. ARC advises leading companies, municipalities, and governments on technology trends and market dynamics that affect their business and quality of life in their cities. To engage further, please like and share our podcast or reach out directly on Twitter at Smart City Viewpoints or on our website at www.arcweb.com/industries/smart-cities.
Welcome to another episode of the ARC Advisory Group Smart Cities podcast. I'm Eddie Fidler. I'm a transport analyst at ARC, and I'm happy to be joined today by James Cater. He's the program lead for EV infrastructure at Eversource. Hey, James.
Hello, Ed. How are you?
Good. I'm well. How are you?
Excellent. I'm excited about talking to you guys once again about where we stand with EV and EV infrastructure and what we've got planned for the future.
Perfect. Yeah, James was kind enough to come on the show last year and introduce the program, and now you're coming back to give us an update and chat about some related topics as well. So that's great. In case anyone missed that first episode, maybe you can just very quickly touch on your background and what you do at Eversource.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Ed. So I am the program lead for EV infrastructure at Eversource Energy. Eversource is the largest energy delivery company in New England, servicing approximately 4 million customers with electricity, natural gas, and water. And those 4 million customers are split between 3 states, Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Rhode Island. And so in my role, what I do is I manage our efforts to electrify transportation, specifically right now in passenger vehicles, and work on a program in Massachusetts and hopefully further programs, fingers crossed, further programs in New Hampshire and Connecticut to deploy EV infrastructure so that we can advance electric vehicle adoption in those territories.
Perfect. Okay. So I'd love to hear about how that program has progressed since we talked about maybe a year ago. So maybe you could just introduce some details about what the program is, what you're trying to do, and how you're doing it, and then you can update us.
Sure. So quickly, background. At the end of 2017, our regulators at the state, as part of a grid modernization effort, gave us the ability to deploy $45 million of $45 million for the purposes of deploying electric vehicle infrastructure in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Now, what do we mean by electric vehicle infrastructure? That is the pipes and the wires and the necessary transformations, the transformers and distribution to allow power to be brought from a power source out to a parking lot. And then once power is brought to the parking lot, a customer, one of our customers, whether it's a business or a multi-unit property or a retail location, can then purchase a charging station, level 2 or DC fast, and install it onto the electrical stub out that we leave. We pay for that entire amount, that entire footprint from the power source up to the charging station location. We don't pay for the charging station itself, but all of that infrastructure is between 50 and 90% of the cost of bringing power to the station. So if you can imagine, it's an incredible benefit to our customers and customers who are looking to get in the EV game, so to speak. And so we have been very successful in deploying those dollars to what looks like at the end of the term of the $45 million, 400 plus or minus sites in in our electric service territory in Massachusetts. Now, when I mean sites, that means at least one dual port level 2 charging station. Could be many more, but that's how we sort of are calling each of the sites. But it's been one heck of an effort. The original schedule, just to give a sense of timing, the original schedule for the program was originally listed as a 5-year program. We will have all of the dollars spent and all of the pipes and wires in the ground in 3.5 years, whereas the original program was 5 years. So we've done it at an accelerated pace, and we've had quite a bit of success and a lot of great conversations with our customer partners.
Wow, so demand has been keeping up. Let's say that. Demand has been incredible.
Demand has been very robust. It's been very robust. I think there was a lot of pent-up interest and demand from our customers in wanting to do electric vehicle infrastructure, putting in charging stations. They just didn't know how, and they didn't have the ability to do so in terms of cost. Our program really lowered the hurdle to get our customers to implement these stations at their work areas, at their place of residence, at their places of at their retail locations. So we've been very happy to help them on their path towards electrification.
Mm-hmm. So I think it's somewhat underappreciated how much of a cost barrier that infrastructure actually is. Maybe you can just walk through it a little bit in a little more detail of what you're actually doing to prepare for the charger installation.
Yeah, and you know what, you're right, Ed, is that it is sort of underappreciated, right? People see these charging stations at parking lots,
right? A nice box.
And I think they don't fully appreciate that, power isn't necessarily everywhere, right? You have to bring it from a location to a location, and that in most cases means that you have to put down pipes and wires, and you have to do trenching, and you have to trenching in concrete or asphalt, and you have to make sure that the location is and the infrastructure is safe and it's managed right, and that there is enough capacity for that electric infrastructure. In a lot of cases, what had happened before our program existed was that customers would bring power from an electric panel in or around their building, and then bring it out to a parking space where they put down the charger. Now, that's okay. It's not ideal because you don't necessarily know what the power constraints are on that electric panel, because that electric panel is serving the existing building or the existing load. So you have some uncertainty there. You also have uncertainty with respect to how much load you can put on it. So if you're an employer and you've got a huge parking lot, you've got 600, 800, 1,000 parking spaces, you'd want to put in quite a few electric vehicle charging stations. But you can't necessarily, because you have that uncertainty about knowing how much power you can actually use. So the program solves a couple of problems in that A, we pay for that infrastructure. B, we pull a separately metered service to the location where you can then install a charging station so that you are assured that you have the power necessary and the capacity necessary to put down several charging stations at one time. And we make it safe. We make sure there is no overloading on the circuit. We make sure that that separately metered service is capable to handle the growing load of growing adoption of EVs that is sure to come.
Okay, so a lot goes into it beneath the shiny box that you plug your leaf into.
Most definitely. I think it's really and it's infrastructure at the end of the day. It's pipes and wires. As I had mentioned at our previous podcast, we at Eversource we're really in our sweet spot here, right? We are at the end of the day an infrastructure company. And we are involved in delivering electricity safely and effectively and reliably to our customer. It's no different than us setting up a new service at a home or business. In this case, that electric load moves and goes from place to place. But Eversource, we have sort of the expertise, the fundamental expertise in electric delivery. In this case, we are delivering that electricity to transportation as well.
Okay, got it. Thanks for the clarification there. So there's a lot of demand for EV charging, as we're saying. So who are those customers? You mentioned workplaces at corporates. So who is it?
Yeah, so when we started this program, a lot of our customers were the same customers that we had been engaging with, on a daily basis. Businesses that are keen to offer incentives for their employees, as they go from work, beyond home charging, which takes up approximately 80% of a charging regime, meaning that someone who owns an electric vehicle, about 80% of the charging that they do is done at home. After that, what follows is charging at their workplace. So if you were a office, suburban office, a city office, in a lot of senses, you might want to provide that amenity to your employees while they're at work. They can get a quick charge. It also helps for those employees who don't have a driveway or a parking garage where they can plug in, right? And so for those employees, the workplace is their primary place to charge. And we've seen that quite a bit, as you can imagine, in the dense neighborhoods of Boston and Cambridge and Somerville, that potential EV owners seek out places where they can charge where they can't otherwise charge because they don't have a driveway or a garage to go to at night. So workplaces is number one. Close behind that, and the in quotes customer that was also very engaged very early on were our municipal and community partners, the cities and towns that we serve. As you can imagine, city budgets and town budgets are always tight. And so they're always looking for ways in which they can leverage additional dollars to move forward their goals. We live in a progressive environment in Massachusetts, and dozens of cities and towns want to be able to burnish their green credentials. And so the program allowed for cities and towns to make EV infrastructure and deploying electric vehicle charging stations in their communities made a much lower lift for them. And so in the beginning and through up to perhaps 3 to 6 months ago, the leading customers for our deployments were either municipalities or workplaces. What we have seen recently, though, over time, and this is actually a trend, because I talked to a lot of other folks in the business and in the utility business that are involved in electric vehicle charging. They say that multi-unit dwellings have also come to the fore, right? And it makes sense because it's the same as being able to park your car in your garage or driveway at night. Having that access to charging where you live is very important. And property managers of multi-unit dwellings, large apartment buildings, and condos see that also as an amenity for their tenants, and so are now dipping their toe in the water with respect to offering it as an opportunity, and we are glad to see it.
Okay. Yeah, as somebody who does live in the city of Boston and would love an EV but does not have a driveway, I really resonate with that first point about workplace. That's great to hear. And then I hear municipal. So this is public charging for residents and visitors, right, in downtown and shopping centers. And then multi-units, just expanding that idea of residential charging.
Exactly. It's like it is residential charging, but what we allow, the caveat is that it's not dedicated, right? So the customers that have been stepping up are those customers that have so-called non-deeded parking at their apartment building or condo association. So let's say you have visitor parking lot that allows for deployment of electric vehicle charging in places where everyone at the apartment building can access that charging, and it's not dedicated to any one person.
Right. Sure. It's not going to apply to every single complex right away. And I'm sure that's the same case with workplaces too. But with such a big potential space, even 50% would be game changing for a lot of people, right? Even some penetration is really important.
Exactly, and it's both penetration, but the thing that we've seen is deployment of charging stations is both a practical device and it's also a signaling device to new drivers, right? So if range anxiety is the largest barrier to EV adoption, the more charging stations you see on the highways and byways, at your workplace, at your apartment building, the higher the propensity for you to think about your next car being an EV. So it is both an item that can be used now, but it also signals and allows people to get in the mindset of thinking about, well, okay, my next car could be an EV because, hey, I see places where I can charge.
Yep. And I have that conversation with folks, even just in my personal life, constantly, just absolutely constantly. So that's very important. And, building off that, it's the charging side, but we're also seeing new vehicle models coming out to sort of satisfy every taste, every need, every range level. We're seeing costs continue to drop for EVs. So it's just a very exciting time for the space. It's really, really incredible.
Really is. It really is, Edward. And 2021, 2022 are going to be game changers with respect to the number of models that are going to be coming out, the different kind of models that are going to be coming out. It's not just going to be Tesla's game anymore, right?
Oh yeah.
You've got the original American OEMs stepping to the front, using their signals they're electrifying their signature models. I mean, when Ford announced that both the Mustang and the F-150 were getting electric vehicle models attached to them, that in and of itself is a game changer. That is one of the original American car manufacturers saying, okay, we're going to put our money where our mouth is, and these, our top two models, are going to be electrified. And that says something. And then you have GM reconfiguring a number of their plants to suit solely electric vehicles. And we're not even touching on what's coming out in the medium duty and heavy duty space, which is going to be pretty amazing over the next couple of years. There's a number of large companies that are having live conversations now about what electrification means for their logistics, their transportation, so on and so forth. And those models that suit those needs are following relatively quickly.
Yeah, that's something we talk about quite a bit here at ARC. It's that the residential side of it, the private vehicle side of it is fantastic and it's booming. Like you said, of course, the electric Mustang is incredible. It's really moving that way. But what's just as fascinating is the commercial side. Logistics, supply chain, ride hail, even things like that. So I wanted to actually ask you: are you having those conversations with fleets in the region about electrifying and what that means from an energy perspective?
Yeah, so I would couch it as two parallel paths. We are both having conversations with our both on the policy level and on the implementation level. At the policy level, the state, as I mentioned before, is very progressive, right? So they're very leaning forward on this electrification space, and for the purposes of wide carbon reduction, greenhouse gas reduction at the state. So transportation being 40 to 45% of carbon emissions for the state, and a goal of being carbon neutral by 2050, the policies that are instituted really have to adhere and move the ball forward in terms of reducing that gap. And so at the policy level, there are a number of things that are taking place, specifically around electrification of transportation and around trying to support early adoption of medium duty, heavy duty vehicles. And those conversations are taking place at the highest levels at the state. So those and we are involved in a number of those conversations. So that's great to see in terms of progress, in terms of us sort of working together on a number of these outcomes. At the implementation level, we are having a number of conversations with customers I'm sure you're familiar with about what their plans are for fleet electrification. So it starts at the bottom with light duty passenger vehicles. Our communities that took early advantage of the Make Ready program, the EV infrastructure program in their public lots, are now coming back to us for conversations about electrifying their fleets. City of Boston, City of Cambridge, City of Somerville, and many of the outlying have fleets, light duty fleets for their city and town employees to get around, do public works projects, go from place to place, and so they're interested in that electrification conversation, and we're having that live. At a more commercial vehicle level, we are having very in-depth conversations around transit, around electrification of medium duty last mile delivery customers. So this conversation is happening today. I will say that the conversation is not an easy conversation, where we have, and let me explain why I say that. I think medium duty and heavy duty vehicles are different. Each fleet is slightly different from another fleet, and so you really have to get into a consultative approach with that fleet customer about what their needs are, what their business looks like, and then how we can wrap that in an electrification strategy for transportation, because each of these companies that is in the medium duty, heavy duty space has those vehicles really has a different story to tell and different needs.
So how that differing mission profile for a fleet actually plays out for you as the utility, it probably comes down to the charging speed that's required by the fleet. So that has to do with the power requirement from your end, correct?
Yeah, no, that's correct. Correct, Ed. What we've seen is, depending also on the profile of the customer, you might a level 2 charging regime might work out quite well, right? So you might have the ability to have 8 hours or more where a fleet vehicle will be idle or won't be in use, and so you can make use of a level 2 charging station between 7 and 10 kilowatts. And the load on the grid and the grid constraints are not nearly as much, or you don't have to do as many considerations because you just have a regular J1772 plug, right? And so, as we sort of enter into this fleet environment, there's a lot of companies that are looking, a lot of customers that have that profile. However, I will say increasingly so, we are having conversations with customers who do have fleet, who have heavier requirements, require that the fleet be in constant rotation and therefore need quicker charges, faster charges that require more power, and thereby requiring more power, we have to have a much broader conversation with them about what their electricity needs are. And those conversations have to take place earlier in the cycle because of the considerations that need to be taken in, how we evaluate that customer, what kind of power needs they have, how we can help them fulfill their power needs based on where they are, where they want to house those vehicles, and what their electrification strategy looks like over time, meaning how quickly do they want to convert their entire fleet, how long that timeline is, and what kind of changes in business might beget their conversion to electric vehicles.
And yeah, a lot of that that power upgrade has to start early, just in the construction planning process, especially if they require fast charging and all of that. So it's good to have those conversations early. It really beats buying a fleet of electric buses and then having to sit on them for a year because you didn't have this conversation ahead of time, right?
And everybody's coming at this relatively new, and so, and as are we. I mean, at the end of the day, the utility is introducing itself into the transportation space, something that's really we haven't done before. And so we are learning a new business. We're learning new aspects of our customers' business and really engaging with them in that consultative approach about, okay, what is your electrification strategy look like? How can we assist you? How can we maximize your thoughts around getting all of your vehicles to be electric vehicles? It's really that consultative approach. And we do that as a matter of course with many of our customers, both in, just helping them get new service into their building, but also with respect to energy efficiency, with respect to distributed generation, solar, with respect to battery storage, and now with respect to electrifying their fleets. And so really, when we talk about being a trusted energy advisor, it's all of that, right? All of the energy needs of a customer, now transportation included, are part of that story.
Okay. Well, hey, it sounds fun from your perspective, at least. It's never going to be dull.
It will not be dull. I tell people, I tell my friends who sort of poo-poo the fact that I work for a utility, that is the most boring job of my life. I'm like, actually, no, you know what? The secret is, it's actually incredibly fun. It's incredibly interesting. Things change every day. And as a utility, we get exposed to everything in the energy complex. This space, transportation, just being the newest space and the one that is, in my mind, the most dynamic.
Right. No, that's awesome. And going off that piece about energy capacity and different charging regimes, how does energy management and demand response play into this?
Right. So you want to make sure that when you are putting in more load, right? In this case, it's a electric vehicle. When you are adding load to the system, you want to make sure you are optimizing the ability to make use of the grid and maximize the utility, so to speak, of the grid. So what do I mean by that? So what is the ability for the utility to engage with our customers to help them or incentivize them to charge their vehicles, not during the day, but maybe at night if there was no difference in if there was no sort of consideration between the two. So if someone didn't care whether or not they charge in the afternoon or at night, we would want to help them think about scheduling your charging during the evening instead of during the day. And we do that by helping to incent sort of their charging schedule. We also incent them by being able to help them to respond to demand management signals or demand response signals during peak times during the day, where we can turn down the charging regime. Now, customers need to sign up for this, right? It's not that we do it automatically, but we think it's a good benefit to our customer that they can be active in the demand management space and potentially lower their own demand charges over time. The fact that a customer can or we can help a customer move their charging regime from the middle of the day and peak usage periods to the overnight cycle between, let's say, midnight and 6 a.m., that raises the entire utilization of the grid overall, because the grid isn't really being used in the wee hours of the morning. So there's a lot of headroom in that grid for additional load. So if you're charging overnight, you're increasing that utilization of the grid overall and helping to make the grid a more valuable asset overall, because now that utilization rate is ticking up with respect to the overall usability of it. With respect to benefit to the customer, you want to be able to benefit from being a part of a demand management program or demand management regime. And so we offer those benefits to customers that participate. Now, currently right now we're running just pilots in our service territory with a keen eye towards expansion, especially when we start talking to medium duty and heavy duty, light duty fleets, because I think demand management is going to be key for those sectors when that implementation starts heating up. Specifically because you want to make sure you are maximizing the use of the grid, and you want to make sure that your customers are getting all the benefits from scheduling their charging regime.
Got it. And that's really going to become more and more important as the kind of vehicles, the kind of fleets that are electrifying simply take more power and there's more of them.
Correct. And not just that, the variability in charging is going to increase too. Because because vehicles are not static, right? They go from place to place to place. Even if you have a set schedule, those things can move, right? And so you want to be able to have some view into the assets that are charging or not charging, and being able to manage them so that both the customer, us, the utility, and the customer's customer are that resource is optimized across the system.
Let's talk about regulation just a little bit. It's obviously quite topical now with the election just behind us, and we're expecting new leadership at the federal level, at least at FERC, DOE, DOT, EPA. You mentioned a lot of the impact for you is on the state level regulation, of course, but maybe just touch on that side of things going forward, and then we can do some closing thoughts.
Sure. Thanks, Ed. And yeah, as I mentioned, I think, in the absence of what we've seen policy at the federal level towards electric vehicles, at least recently, in the past few years, I think cities and states have been leaders here. They've been leaders in policy, they've been putting their money where their mouth is by offering incentives for buying down the cost of electric vehicles, buying down the cost of infrastructure and actual charging stations. Our program here at Eversource goes a long way to help that implementation, but that program was we were allowed to do so because our regulators saw a need, right? So I think going forward, you're going to continue to see that momentum at the city and state level around moving policy forward that allows for a large uptick in EV adoption and EV infrastructure deployment. Cities play a central role in this because that's where a lot of the greenhouse gas emissions are concentrated. You have people coming from work, not now because of the pandemic. We hopefully are seeing a way out of it, and maybe a movement back towards a new normal. But before the pandemic hit, cities were a central. They were centered and focused on reducing greenhouse gas emissions in transportation, and so I continue to believe that effort will be accelerated over time, because cities are very keen on being able to lower that greenhouse gas emissions wedge. At the state level, a number of states are looking at ways in which they can reduce greenhouse gas emissions overall. There's a collaboration between 12 states and the District of Columbia that is taking place now, called the TCI, Transportation Collaborative Initiative. I believe that's an acronym. Mm-hmm. That works a lot like the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, which is sort of a cap and trade strategy whereby emitters of carbon dioxide in the transportation space pay into a fund that then gets distributed among the states for the purpose of making transportation more clean. And so that's going to be an exciting thing. That is a collaboration among all the states on the Eastern Seaboard down to Washington, D.C. That continues to help move the momentum. And it's, again, a comment on states stepping up where there was lack of sort of federal guidance.
Right. That program is fascinating because those states and the District of Columbia together represent something like 50 million citizens and a multi-trillion-dollar economy. It's really, really impressive.
It is.
And it also speaks to the power of sort of a distributed system of government that we have, where if the federal government isn't too keen on a particular issue, but it's important to the majority of people, action can take place at the state and local level, and it's still significant. So it's great to see that.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're excited to play a role, if any, when it gets to the point of when it moves down the road a little bit.
Sure, yeah. So maybe we could just wrap up with some closing thoughts from you on the path forward, some of the roadblocks, and you also mentioned earlier that there's an equity component to all of this going forward. So.
Sure. No, thank you for touching on that, Ed. I mean, we're excited here at Eversource. We had a 5-year plan for our original program. We will have completed it in 3.5 years. And so we are asking our regulators, hey, give us some more opportunity here. We have pitched to our regulators additional program features, support for fleets, medium heavy duty fleets, like we spoke about, being able to think more broadly about what is required for DC fast stations, because they are different from level 2 stations. The considerations are different. The costs are different. And so we'd want to be able to support that. A robust EV infrastructure deployment or fleet of EV charging stations has to include a strategically placed group of DC fast stations. And it just helps to advance EV adoption. So we're really excited about that. We're excited about doing something similar in Connecticut, which has been, which we think will be a very strong program. As you can imagine, Connecticut has less of a mass transit infrastructure than Massachusetts, at least Eastern Massachusetts does. And so they are more reliant on their cars to get from place to place. Mm-hmm. And therefore, EV infrastructure is going to be very important for the state of Connecticut and the electric service territory we have there. We are also putting together plans for a program in our New Hampshire territory, which revolves around the travel corridors, the interstate routes that go from north to south, and support of DC fast charging stations up there. And so the future looks bright for us. One thing that we are really keen on trying to solve here, and it's a passion of mine and something that I try to think a lot about on a daily basis, is this thing around transportation equity. We know that transportation is electrifying, and this represents a sea change in this space. What we want to do and what we want to ensure is that as this sea change is happening, that it is equal and it has components of equity, and so that as we're walking through this program or these programs that currently revolve around EV infrastructure, that our customers who don't have access to own an EV, and in fact might not even have access and don't own a regular gasoline powered car, can still access the programmatic dollars that are being spent for the benefit of all of our ratepayers, right? As a utility, our DNA is to service all customers, right? And if our DNA is to service if our mission is to service all customers equally, if we are deploying program dollars for EV infrastructure, that EV infrastructure should in some way benefit everyone, those who own vehicles and those who don't. And so we're really excited about other parts to the program that incorporate vehicle electrification that don't necessarily have to do with a passenger electric vehicle. Owning one might have to do with renting one short term, might have to do with micromobility, might have to do with being able to advance and accelerate electrification of mass transit so that each and every one of our customers is benefiting from the transition from gasoline-powered vehicles and diesel-powered vehicles to electric-powered vehicles. So we are working with a number of partners in that area, and more to come. I can't say a lot about it right now because it's sort of in the planning phases, but certainly you will see it come to the fore in terms of opportunities to advance equity in the transportation electrification space.
Wow, so plenty of opportunities there, and a lot of exciting stuff for you guys to work on going forward.
That is for certain.
Perfect. Okay, so I think we could close with that. James, thank you for joining and giving us an update on all the work you're doing there, and look forward to chatting with you again.
It's been my pleasure, Ed. We appreciate having this platform to talk about our programs and what's to come. It's really exciting.
Perfect. Okay, thanks, James. Take care.
Thank you, Ed.
Broadcasting from Boston, Massachusetts, the Smart Cities podcast is the only podcast dedicated to all things smart cities. The podcast is the creation of ARC Advisory Group's Smart City practice. ARC advises leading companies, municipalities, and governments on technology trends and market dynamics that affect their business and quality of life in their cities. To engage further, please like and share our podcast or reach out directly on Twitter at Smart City Viewpoints or on our website at www.arcweb.com/industries/smart-cities.